Welcome back to Jacques in the Garden. I've had this shed for about 2 months now, and in that time I finally figured out how to make the best use of it. From organizing all my tools on my pegboard to making use of the workbench and shelving in there, and even how I powered the shed, which as you can see on the roof there is actually through solar. Now I do have a lot of future plans for this shed, so let's get into what I've done, how I'm using it, and what I plan to do with the shed over the next coming months. One of my goals with all the buildings that I've added to the property over these past couple of years, like the greenhouse and now the shed, is to power them via solar. It's very expensive to get an electrician out here in San Diego, even to just run a simple conduit underground, like 30 feet. Some people were charging $1,000, $3,000, and it's just really not worth it on top of the already super expensive electricity cost. So with that in mind, I actually have my old panel from the greenhouse and the new panel, which is a 220 watt panel from EcoFlow. EcoFlow is the sponsor of today's video. Without them, I would not have been able to power up my shed in the way that I have. And we will be touching on the solar system a little bit throughout the video, but I did want to mention that right now I have two 220 watt panels that are tied together into one cable, and all of that goes down to the back side of my shed and into the shed where it then plugs into the battery. So let me give you a quick overview of the stuff out here, and then we'll pop inside the shed and take a look at all that great organization that I've added. The very first thing I did when I got the shed was set up a little podcast recording area. If you guys don't know, we have the Beat podcast, which we record in video and audio, and all of the video, if you've watched it, is me sitting right here with the yellow backdrop of my shed. This has made, for me, making content so much easier because I have controlled light, controlled sound. When you're recording for an hour, you can't really risk going outside with spotty sunlight. Having a nice backdrop like this has made my life much easier. The other thing you'll notice is that I've attached a couple string lights here to the exterior of the shed. This is illuminating this whole area over here, which is where we hang out and party at night. It's really wonderful in the summer, and this string light has fully illuminated this area now. Of course, we have the hammock for vibes and hanging out. And the last thing I want to point out is that you could see the two panels tied together up there, leading with the cable to the edge of the roof. So let me bring you to that side where I show you how it connects and goes into the shed. So for now, my cable is a little bit short, so I'm going to pick up an extension, but you can see it drapes over the edge here. I have it screwed up against the wall. It's mostly flush. Once I get a longer cable, I'd be able to really flush this together. But right here is where I'm able to come into the shed. After looking around the shed for quite a while, I noticed that these vents were a bit oversized to the holes they're on, and that is so that they have a big lip to overlap the cutout for where the vent sits. And I realized if I cut off just a tiny piece of plastic, this little tab here, maybe about 1/2 inch deep, I could slide that cable right inside the shed without making any new holes to the structure itself. So let's pop inside, take a look at the organization, and see how the solar connects to everything else. I have to say, it does feel a little bit good to be organized. I am not a very organized person, believe it or not. I don't like spending time on creating systems and organization. So just the fact that I completed this feels really good. It was a little bit of trial and error to figure out what the best pegboard attachment was, where should I put it, do I want things to be even? I decided I don't care about the lineup of things. I just want to put it all on the wall in the most efficient, dense way possible. So starting on this side, I have things that I don't access very often because they're on the far end of the shed. And that includes these tomato cages, which I put away for the season. They're able to hang on a couple of these pegboard hooks and honestly don't take up a lot of space. So over here, I think I have about 4 different trellises, and that's quite dense. I've got my little fold-out table, which I use occasionally. But one thing that I'm very excited about adding to the shed are these blinds. I actually picked these up at IKEA. Not that expensive, super easy to install. And it gives me full control of light in my shed, privacy in the shed. I can put tools in here and then pull the blinds down to hide them. So I'm really happy I got those headed on. They've added a lot to the shed. Now, in terms of other things, I of course have my harvest baskets here, which are just hanging on a simple hook. Ready to go, easy to put away, doesn't stick out and take up too much space. Then I've got a couple weird things here. I've got this paper towel dispenser, which I've rigged up to now be a twine dispenser, because every once in a while you need a little bit of twine in the garden and you don't want to just bring the whole roll around with you. I've also got a little bit of paracord here and some 1/4 inch irrigation tubing. I don't know if this is honestly the most useful way to store it, but for now it's working. Likewise, I've got some extra tubing right there. And my kneeler, having the kneeling pad actually accessible and stored somewhere where I could just grab it will probably increase the chances of me using it. I don't know if I'm still gonna have the foresight to grab it, but at least now the option is visible. I of course have my wheat beating tool back here. That's that custom tool I made for threshing wheat in my wheat harvest video. That definitely deserves a spot on the wall. And I've got a bunch of weeding tools, including a little mini hoe, which I actually quite like to use, especially on hard, compact ground. My Cobra head, my Korean weeding tool, mini hula hoe, and then a whole bunch of digging implements. My favorite trowels are always these Wilcox ones because I tend to destroy things, and those have held up quite well for me. I also have a couple of various scoops, including this weird one. This is actually a giant ice scoop. I just saw it and I figured it would be really good for scooping soil out of a bag and dropping it into containers. So that's a new addition I haven't yet played with, but it's just literally an ice scoop. Now, of course, I do have a couple new tools. Like right here, I've got my sickle yet to be used. But last year when I grew the wheat, I actually harvested every single individual plant of wheat using a pruner, and that was hundreds of cuts. So this is going to make life much easier. I just grab a bundle of wheat and whoosh, and it's cut. So I can't wait to make use of that. Very much looking forward to it. But as you can see, the things that I use most frequently are on this side. So my pruners, that's like the daily use kind of tool, is going to be right by the door of the shed. I've got my holster here, sharpening tool, so I could keep everything working really well and efficient. Everything has its own dedicated spot, so it's not just a pile of stuff, which means that if I take these and they're gone, I know that I could always bring them back and put them right here, because that space is not going to be taken up by anything else. Now, I should mention, of course, that my 2 machetes, yes, I have 2 machetes. Everyone should have at least 2 machetes, are also hanging here ready to use whenever I need them. So this will make my life easier, and I will mention I've got a couple power tools in here. These are the ones that are garden related. So I've got my pole saw, my hedge trimmer, and my weed whacker. They don't get used that often, but they should really be in the shed because they only get used outside, and it just makes a lot of sense. So this will make my life personally a lot better. I highly recommend that wherever it is, whether it's like in a garage, in a shed, or where even just a board that you could put a little roof over in your garden, having a tool wall like this is going to make life much better. Now, I do have this whole other section here, which is my workbench, and I'm extremely excited to make use of this side of the shed. This side of the shed is where the workbench lives, and I've got this wonderful window behind me to let some natural light in, but I do have plans on making heavy use of this space in the wintertime because it's starting to get a little bit too cold outside, even in San Diego. So what do I have here so far? Well, on this far side, I have all my extra pegboard attachments for when I add future tools to the pegboard wall, and of course this space as well. I haven't quite decided yet if I want to put up my carving tools or keep them in the tool rolls. I'll show you that in a moment. But for now, it's mostly just kind of loose storage. I've got my extra hat here. I've got a bunch of this green Oaxacan dent corn, which we're actually planning to nixtamalize and turn into tamales for Christmas this year. So having a shed is really great for hanging things that need to be somewhere dry, somewhere out of the elements, out of the sun, where you don't have space indoors. So that's been one of my favorite things so far about having a shed. And of course, I do have all of my woodworking stuff right over here. So as I mentioned, I am super into carving stuff lately. And I've got my Sloyd knife. This is the #1 thing I would recommend for anyone who wants to get into carving is to get yourself a good Sloyd knife. The other thing hiding in the corner up here is some of my wood blanks. So right here is a future salad tossing kit. This is 1/2 of the salad tossing set. And this was actually carved out on my scroll saw, which I keep in here as well. So this is just a hobby, fun little activity that I like to relax. Actually, me and Kevin will carve together sometimes. And it's just a very sort of meditative, relaxing activity. Got all of my tools in the baskets there. And like I said, I might hang them up on the wall, but honestly, I love having them in these tool rolls. It's very handy to take them with you. Now, the other thing you're seeing over here is I do have a miniature propagation station. In this case, it is all for this pomegranate that I found growing near my sidewalk. I have no idea what the variety is or where it came from. So I took a bunch of cuttings and I've been keeping them in the shed because I have a heat mat here and it's just a controlled environment. Anytime you have a controlled space, it's much better for propagation than like, for example, doing it outside. Now, I also have this dehydrator here because I noticed that my previous strategy, which was the lazy way, was I collected a bunch of peppers and just piled them inside of here and hoped that they would dry properly. Most of them did dry properly, but I did have to throw away about like 30% of them because they started to rot or have weird black spots. So one thing that I'm very excited about now is that I do have a dehydrator in here, which does have power. And that brings us to our sponsor of today's video, which is EcoFlow. Thanks to EcoFlow for sponsoring this video and for electrifying my shed. I've actually had an EcoFlow battery, the Delta 2 Max here, for about 10 months now. And that guy has been living inside my greenhouse all throughout the summer. So heat, humidity did not skip a beat. It was being charged by a 220-watt portable panel, and it was the entire basis of air circulation inside my greenhouse. It's still working totally fine. And actually, before I got this one, I was using that to power an indoor mushroom growing video. So these batteries have been very kind to me, and this time I wanted to upgrade to something more future-proof, so I got the Delta 3 Pro. This bad boy is loaded with all sorts of really interesting, unique, and useful features. It has a 4 kilowatt capacity, so that is quite a lot of wattage. And the cool thing is that it also can boost to power all sorts of heavy-duty equipment. Things like washers, dryers, water heaters, ovens. I use it to actually power a pressure washer and wash my driveway in an area where I actually don't have any ability to pull power to. So this thing has been extremely useful. I still have so many new use cases to think about. EcoFlow has an extra product which I might add in the future. I believe it's called the Smart Home Panel 2, which allows you to tie this battery directly into the electrical grid of your home. This allows you to do a couple different things. You can use it as a backup emergency power. This even has a 10 millisecond response time for like emergency UPS abilities if you have a server or computers that you don't want to just randomly cut out from the power. You could also use it to charge during the cheaper times at night and then run your electricity from your battery at the more expensive times in the daytime. So a lot of interesting capabilities here. The crazy thing is that this thing can also power an electric car. Yes, you could charge an electric car with it. You could hook it up to a camper. There are all these ports here that are designed to hook into all sorts of different systems. 120, 240 volt plugs, everything you could really think of, fast charging USB, regular USB. And on top of that, you could actually hook up 2 separate solar systems to the same battery. And you could get additional, I believe they're 4 kilowatt hour batteries that stack on top of this that will bring this system to 12 kilowatts on just a single unit. When you tie 3 of those together, you get 36 kilowatts of power that you could hook up directly to your home. One of the other features I really appreciate is this pull-out handle and heavy-duty wheels on the back of this. It made it really easy for me to wheel this out to my driveway. It even went over a hose, no problem, and it means that I could take this power anywhere I please. I actually use these batteries all the time to help film videos. When I'm cooking outside, I'm powering my induction cooktop, my grain mill, and anything else I might need to cook a wonderful meal outside. And right now, you guys could save big with EcoFlow with up to $4,000 in savings on select systems, available on their website or on Amazon Prime, where they have Amazon Prime daily deals. They might even cut a deeper discount. I will also include a 7% off code down in my description. All you have to do is include that at checkout, and you should be able to get 7% off in addition to whatever else you are buying. So EcoFlow, fantastic product, fantastic company. I am still amazed that this battery survived in my greenhouse for 10 months throughout the entire summer and is still working fine. Speaking to the longevity of these batteries, they are LFP batteries, which I believe is an iron-based battery, and they could cycle up to 4,000 times. That means that this battery should last me 11 years before it actually starts to give up the ghost, and it already includes a guaranteed 5-year warranty. Now, let's get back to the shed because we have one more major section that we have to discuss on this side. Before we get to those future exciting projects such as my rain capture ideas and my outdoor storage expansion, we do need to cover the last bit of shelving inside the shed here. Now, very interestingly enough, I've been using this to grow mushrooms for the past 2 months. I actually am recording a full video that you guys will see soon on how to grow mushrooms indoors, and I use the shed as an indoors example. I've actually been powering these automated boomer bins from Nordspor entirely off the EcoFlow. This is the old one that I had that was originally in the greenhouse, and I did move it into here because in this winter time period, I'm not really using the power in the greenhouse, so I've been actually using it to power my mushroom grow, which has been a little bit interesting. I never thought I'd be growing solar powered mushrooms before, but here I am. It actually worked out great. You'll see that in the video. Now up here, I'm just putting this here as an example, but I do have plans of doing some indoor seed starting inside the shed. I have power now. I could run heat mats. I could hang up a grow light. And this is honestly a pretty ideal setup and spacing for doing all sorts of indoor growing. Right here, this height distance is enough that you could have a light lifting all the way up, even for mature tomatoes. So I will be using this space probably a little bit. I do have the greenhouse, so it's a little bit silly, but I do want this as an example for you guys who are growing indoors, or maybe you have a shed and not a greenhouse and you want to figure out how to do a setup of your very own. So that is a future plan over here. Otherwise, it is shelving, so it's mostly just storage for now. I actually have a bunch of my seed potatoes that I need to plant soon. In this box, I have onion starts, which are desperate for planting as well. But it's just great to have a space that's indoors, but not inside my house where I can bring all this gardening supplies into. Otherwise, these things tend to pile up on my computer desk or on the dining room table, which always gets me in trouble. So this has been really fantastic just to get things out of the way. I also have things that I access more regularly, like up here. I've made this I think this is technically a fish tackle set, but I've turned it into a little mini irrigation kit. So in here I have all the different irrigation supplies that I need whenever I'm doing a repair or expanding my irrigation. Having it accessible and stowable is really fantastic. And even though this is a garden shed, it's also still a shed. So I have a bunch of miscellaneous paint, concrete, all sorts of stuff stored in the corner here, out of sight, out of mind. They'll be there until one day it is needed. Now, the last thing I wanted to mention inside the shed is that right here, I have these ramps, and that is to allow ramping in and out of the shed. I also have a bunch of plywood stored in here. Plywood is something I've always had an issue figuring out where to keep because you can't leave it outside. The water will expand it or ruin it. So having the ability to store my plywood inside a building and not inside my house has also been a really fantastic blessing. So now let's take a look at the outside of the shed and talk about some future plans. One of the things I haven't quite decided how to solve yet is how to actually block this gap that's all the way around the shed. When they installed the shed, they had to level the entire foundation to what was existing, which is a hodgepodge of random pavers. There's no two pavers alike here on my property. It is a funny story. But since I didn't remove it, they had to just work with what they had, which meant that some areas of the shed have these big gaps underneath it. So one of the solutions I thought is on one side of my shed, I have dirt exposed, and there I could hammer in something like this and see if that will block any bigger pests, things like skunks, possums, rats. But honestly, even rats and mice can squeeze through this no problem. So I also am going to try something with chicken wire. Now, that might actually work if I roll up little sleeves of chicken wire and fit them underneath these gaps. That should provide enough blockage and allow airflow, except in an ideal world, I would use hardware cloth because it has smaller holes and even a mouse can't get through that. So let's go around to the other side and see if these will work and what other solutions I might have in play. After looking around for a bit, all I could find is what is at best a temporary solution, and that is using chicken wire. Chicken wire has big holes, it doesn't last that long, but it should last long enough for me to fully protect this side of the shed for now. The nice thing is that I do have a long-term plan, and when I say long-term, I'm hopefully planning on getting it done this year in the winter season, and that is that I'm planning on ripping up the chunk of concrete that I'm right now crouched on and turning this into a lean-to storage area. I have bikes, camping supplies like my Thule roof rack, and I need somewhere to put it. I don't want to put it in the shed where it's going to take up space. So that is why this area is going to get ripped up. I'm going to have to build some little lean-to structure here to shelter all those things that I don't want to put in the shed. So what I'm going to do here is just roll this out to the very end. I'll fold it in half and then we'll kind of make a little corner shape and shove it up against the shed here. I have to say, I really wish that these guys would have worked because this is not the most aesthetic fix, but it does work, and it should last long enough for me to do my final overhaul, at which point I'll actually dig up this area and see where those rocks or bricks or whatever the heck I'm hitting are, so I could actually install something like this instead. One of the other future plans I have in mind for the shed is to actually install a rain gutter capture system. Now for the greenhouse, since it was right next to the garden, I was able to pipe all this water directly into the ground to deep water some of my biggest beds in the garden space. But this guy is a little bit isolated and surrounded by concrete. So what I'll probably end up doing is getting some rain storage tanks, putting it up on the lean-to side, which is that side of the shed, and maybe one of those slim ones that don't take up as much exterior space and could sit right up against the wall. Now, rainwater here in San Diego isn't actually going to save me any money. In fact, the rain barrels will far exceed the cost of any water savings I get, but it is nice to have an emergency water supply for a drought or if there's water rationing due to the drought. And that is why I would actually get a barrel in the first place. It would never be because it would save me any money. So there you have it, an organized shed that is now actually useful and hopefully will bring order to my life. Let me know what you guys think I should do next to the shed if you have any ideas. And as always, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time.